now. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Ann and I are really happy to have you here as we talk about saving some buildings in downtown Trenton. I'm going to share my screen, and Ann is going to kind of introduce our little group while I do that.
Okay, well, for folks, this may be old history to some folks that lived through it, but the stakeholders allied for the core of Trenton came together very early, late in 2016 or very early in 2017, when the then lame duck governor Christie decided to spend a whole lot of money in his last year and build new office buildings downtown. And a lot of us who very much wanted to see the investment were very concerned that the plan did not follow the city's or push forward the city's plan for itself in terms of where concentrations of people should be. So we fought kind of the good fight, we thought, and pushed hard to have the state kind of consider 21st century urban development and look at mixed use buildings, public private partnerships, concentrations of people in the downtown, to reinforce our business community, to reinforce the moves towards having people live downtown, all of that stuff. And the then governor was set on just making this deal happen, wanted no delays, and pushed it through. In spite of us, actually suing with fairly good grounds, we were pretty much told, who was this community group to sue the governor? Forget about it. Um, One of the things that was announced was the demolition of the buildings that were to be replaced, and that would have been taxation, and which is on the corner of East State Street and Barracks, and these two we're concerned about today, commonly known as health and ag. And we immediately raised the issue, particularly on the State Street property, saying, well, that not only is it a huge taxpayer because it's privately owned, it would, tearing it down would create a huge void in State Street. And the state very quickly pulled that off the table. And we kind of fought on the other fronts and didn't focus as much on the demolition part of it. And it knew that they had said that they would consider putting, particularly the taxation building, up for private developers to redevelop and have it remain on the tax rolls to some degree. Well, all these years have gone by, the buildings were now empty, and we kind of assumed they would then be strategizing about next steps for those buildings, only to find that, they've emptied out taxation. They actually don't quite own it yet, so that's kind of not front burner for them. So, but they did move forward nonetheless with plans to tear down health and ag. And in my role as a commercial real estate broker in the area, I had wanted to bring prospective tenants, buyers through that building, and was told, oh, it's underway. So we were able to get a tour of the building, and saw that Turner Construction, a big construction firm, was there doing prep for demolition. And so the mayor accompanied us because the mayor does support saving these buildings. And he reached out and was told that, well, if you've got a developer in hand, we'll stop, but otherwise this needs to go forward. And so the information that we've gathered is that the only plan is to expand those parking lots. That's the state's plan as of now. So we then started to reach out through the existing network from the stakeholders group and just broadly as best we can. And believe me, during a pandemic, it's not easy, as you all know. You can't convene meetings, you can't travel around with a petition on a clipboard. So we've been getting the word out, and this morning session is part of that effort to let people know what's going on and hopefully even enlist people in helping us with this. So what we have done thus far is we have put a petition on our website, and we've been promoting it on Facebook. The petition is directed at the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority that technically owns these buildings, asking that they reconsider the demolition plan. And there are myriad reasons why. And so we'd like to kind of start the conversation with sort of the way we've laid out that that case, if you will.
Yeah.
So Shakira is kind of going through the slides that we prepped for this morning that we can make available to you after the fact. We posted in chat some other kind of fact sheets and a sheet with links to all these kind of plans and stuff that we'll touch on. Um, so starting with that first slide that's up there right now, um, the there are various plans there for the city. We'll touch on that as well. But this is the one that's kind of out there as a part of this downtown master plan. And we've put an arrow to what the state is saying, oh, that'll be built there when we tear these down.
But
Noting in the box, I'll just kind of read that. Everything outlined in red
mhm.
on both sides of the bottom of the screen are renderings. They're renderings of what a planner said we could lay out on this land that might become available if, if we can get this master plan in place. Any plan is expected to happen over many years, but just for reference, Shakira, if you can go back to that second slide, I think it is one more back.
This one
Yeah.
here, this area here.
Yeah. Folks that have been around a long time, Carl, Dan, Ida, some of you will know that back in the late 80s and then culminating in a report in 1989, a very renowned national planning firm, it's a husband and wife team by the name of Andrew Swaney and Elizabeth Plater-Zyberg, were hired to come in and really look at a long-term master plan for Trenton. And what came out of that was the importance to reconnect the city with the river and undo what had been done in the 50s, which was to clear out a pretty solid neighborhood in the downtown and shrink Stacy Park and put a highway through it and create this state campus, if you will.
Urban removal, as I
Yes,
recall.
yeah, they called it urban renewal, but it was definitely urban removal. It was, needless to say, it was not a high income neighborhood that got destroyed. But it certainly disconnected folks from the river. So I don't have their actual plan. It wasn't this beautiful color stuff because this was the 80s. But I do have one, and we'll make that available on the website. But what came later, I mean, people bought into that plan. It was, the idea was to realign Route 29, bring it inland. Yeah, so this is, you see the existing of what it is.
Yeah,
But,
this is what it's supposed. This is what it looks like now, and the
right.
idea was to remove,
Yeah.
to take all of that away, and put just like a boulevard through the city. Am I right? Like through this
Yeah.
area.
Now, if you go, so Shakira, go back to that slide we were just on talking about the plans, and you can
This one.
see,
Oh, this
yeah,
one.
at the top of the left-hand illustration between the A and the D, that's the boulevard being
Oh.
swung in alongside the War Memorial, the hotel, and across the Assunpink Creek,
Hmm.
which is kind of hidden. And then it would,
So this would be
head,
the boulevard. This would
that's
be
that's the boulevard.
that would be the boulevard that replaces Route 29. So traffic
Yes.
would come through the city, and have access routes off to go into the city.
Right. And the
Hmm.
idea, and I remember being at focus groups during the McGreevey administration, they had a consulting firm that was really trying to push ahead with this. They were saying, yes, you would create these good new urban development sites, and then you should build good urban buildings on them.
Hmm.
And that sounded great because Trenton certainly wanted access to the river, but more importantly, we need development. We
Yeah.
need the ratables that means.
Yeah.
And to have prime land kind of dominated simply by state government offices does no good to Trentonians and Trenton taxpayers. It really cuts us off from a tremendous asset. And then you see this sea of parking lots.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
so yeah,
yeah. So I would just like to add that this push for economic development, what Ann is talking about in terms of expanding the number of ratables, meaning privately owned commercial, residential, retail, industrial buildings that are paying taxes. And the reason that we need these ratables obviously is because the city operates based on municipal taxes. Right now, the state of New Jersey takes up somewhere around um, 30-40% of the land mass in the city of Trenton, along with the county government, the city government itself, and all of the nonprofits. That means that about 40 to 50% of all of the rateable, the remaining ratables in the city, meaning residential property, commercial property, industrial property, those properties are the ones that bear the burden for paying for our tax, for our police protection, our sanitation, our fire protection, our health services. I mean, everything that we use to operate in the city is only covered by less than half of the property in the city. And if if the state tears down these two buildings that are potentially rateable properties, it diminishes the likelihood that that any of this development will occur. What they're suggesting is that if they tear this down, make it another parking lot, it becomes attractive to a private developer to come along and say, "Oh yeah, we'd like to put this up," but that's not realistic. It's not likely that anyone will do that. And Anne has done a lot of research and has fielded inquiries from private developers who have come in to look at these two buildings to say, maybe this little block building here, this might be a really interesting residential property. It's got great views of the city and the riverfront. And you can describe the building better than I.
Well, well, actually, by way of a little bit of background, I represent a very large former state office building, privately owned, but formerly leased to the state in the downtown. And I tell people that I could have sold that building 10 times over if it was a good residential conversion. We have constant inquiries for that building. But the building happens to have an elevator core that is tucked into a corner, meaning the distances to windows, the kind of hallways and lost space that would be created to make circulation in apartments work in there makes it kind of design difficult, cost difficult. And so I was really curious when we got the opportunity to see these buildings, if indeed that wasn't the circumstance here. And I was really pleased to see that, in fact, the elevator cores in these buildings are right in the center, meaning that you can go all the way around with views on all sides without having that be interrupted by core building elements. Those are in the middle, and that's exactly where a developer wants them to be. So, unlike the one we are actively marketing downtown, and would certainly that owner wants to see it sold and saved. These ones that are far more appropriate and ready to be developed and converted to a new use, the state sees it as expedient to just, without offering them to the development community, to just demolish them. And it's inexplicable that now this is a leftover from the Christie administration. And we understand that the whole bureaucracy doesn't walk out the door with the governor, so that people that were in place during Christie's administration started this project and they just marched along with it. And I'm going to be generous and say the Murphy people it wasn't on their radar screen. We don't think Trenton is on the capital city is on this administration's radar screen in any particular way. And this is kind of evidence of that, because I don't think anybody kind of visionary from an economic development standpoint, from a community development standpoint, from a real estate standpoint, would just go right to demo. That's the answer here. That's the only answer here, without seriously weighing and testing the market. And there was no test of the market to see if there was developer interest in renovating these buildings. Just let's create some more parking in the meantime, and we'll kind of go through the motions of saying to Trenton, we support your grand plan. But in the reality of what that support could mean, it's almost like they're saying, well, those buildings don't look like what's on the renderings. So let's let them go. They don't look like what some planner, in all good faith, kind of drew on some renderings. So let's just let them go. Yeah, if you can go back to that plan slide, there was one other. Yeah. I wanted to show, because the timing, I think, is kind of important for people to understand. It was 1989, 32 years ago, when this general concept first came about from the original team. And it's been embraced, so that in the downtown master plan that was issued in 2008, there was more detail put onto it. And then the bottom right illustration is the Trenton 250 embellishment of that plan, where they really kind of classified things and labeled sort of the goal, rather than just putting boxes of maybe potential buildings. They see this whole site, where the state has its parking lots and a few buildings, as an area that the city needs to reclaim and redevelop as a part of the realignment and boulevard effort. And encouraging ratables as well is a key part in this general vicinity.
And
Nobody sees,
just for reference, the buildings are here in this point.
where's your,
Am I right?
where it says reclaim and redevelop,
Yes,
in the right hand picture, which you'll see that's the same block.
This is where the two buildings
Yeah,
are. Am I right?
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah. I always use as an anchor that Justice Complex, that kind of
yes, the
triangular modern
triangular
building
building. Yeah, the triangular building. So
that
that
repeats.
right. So
Just
this is where the parking lots are right now, and they propose putting more parking lots right there.
yeah. Um, yeah, and I hope some we put on I think we put on our Facebook page that there was an article about this controversy in Jersey Digs, the kind of North Jersey oriented real estate newsletter and online magazine. And so, that might be worth a read. And they clearly talked to somebody at EDA and confirmed that the EDA's plan is parking in the near term.
Yeah.
And, we've heard this. They're saying, well, those will be development sites, but in the meantime, we can park there. So,
For
I
the
don't
next
think
20 years.
well, this plan has been around for 32 years. And so in the lower left, I'm noting that in 2021, we're now 32 years out from the original issuing of the plan. The only major development that's happened in this whole area is the new taxation building, which I think, at Jeff Laurenti's suggestion, we should all start calling the Chris Christie Department of Taxation, which they put above labor and industry. You'll see a little D at the top of that
Yeah.
drawing on the left. That's where that building got put. It is not mixed use, which is what the Trenton 250 plan called for. And it's not a rateable, which is what the Trenton 250 plan called for. So if folks don't know it, the city can plan all it wants. And in another municipality, they'd have to make it through planning board and council and all the rest. The state doesn't have to do that. They're the state. They can do whatever they want. And clearly, certainly here, they have done that. And there's no reason, there's every signal to think that they will continue to do whatever without real consideration to what the city
And
wants.
I think it might be useful to just talk a little bit for folks who may not be clear about it. Like, what is the difference between single-use buildings and multi-use buildings, and the whole question of sustainability? I mean, we are in an age where we really want to be conservative in terms of our use of energy, our disposal of waste. We're attempting to be green. Where we're trying not to throw away so much waste into our landfills and destroying, just destruction for the sake of destruction. These two buildings are perfectly sound structures, and they also happen to represent some significant historic content, which Ann will talk about in a minute. But I just really want to focus in on the question of sustainability at this point. That building, that taxation building, in terms of being single purpose, means that it's only in use for the time that the people who are working there are in those buildings. In other words, they're not 24/7 buildings. Uh, they're 9 to 5, 8 to 4, and then the rest of the time the building sits empty, which means there's nobody coming on the streets using our shops, using our enjoying the enjoying our city. Our objective is to try to encourage people coming into the city using building space, for more than just 8 hours a day. It's a waste of time and space and energy to build single-use buildings anymore. Nobody is doing this. Wherever development occurs, it's always multi-purpose, multi-use buildings. You're
Yeah.
putting offices on some floors, residential above those floors, commercial on the commercial and retail on the street level, so that the building gets used, and we're not wasting energy. So that's one of the
And I think,
principles that we're trying to promote.
and we should talk too about the parking effect on it.
Yes.
And that's what gives rise to the sea of parking, because it's not convenient for residences to park there. So we have all this parking, both these surface parking lots and even the parking decks in the downtown, that are heavily used during business hours. But when you total it up, the business hours add to less hours in the day than the evenings and weekends. So our parking is more vacant than empty, and yet it's massively using
Yes.
resources
Yes.
that are then just not available to anyone else. And that's where, so that idea of mixed use, mixing uses in a district like this would allow us to kind of do less parking.
Right.
But it also would give rise to just a kind of a healthier node to the city. And for people, there's a lot of us, I live in a 100-plus-year-old home, and I love it, but
Mhm.
that's not to say I wouldn't ever someday like to be in a newer house if the opportunity. And I think a lot of people might want new, or we need to have that range of property options available to people in the city. And this is the place where that could happen
Yeah.
um,
And
here in
there are
Trenton.
developers who are interested. This area here, I know that a developer came in to give a presentation to City Council about the possibility of developing residential property here for millennials. One and two efficiencies, 1 and 2 bedroom units with retail and recreation space. It's enough space to do that. I mean, there's no reason that this building could not kind of fit into that kind of plan. And I think maybe it's helpful to just kind of address the historic factor that these two buildings represent as well. And you really understand the history better
Well,
than I do.
I was interested in reading that Jersey Digs article because clearly they had talked to somebody at EDA, and I think that, tips their hand a little bit about how they treat these. And two things that were interesting is um, they said that these buildings were empty hulls, and I thought, wow, one of them folks just moved out of a few months ago. Does that really mean they had people living in an empty hull? But and we also know that that doesn't even begin to talk about the condition of the Roebling buildings that have been brought back fairly, effectively for both office and residential use. So, renovation and doing and bringing these into another adaptive reuse is eminently doable. Also, they noted in that article that they were told that these buildings were built in what was Stacy Park, and we don't understand that to be the case. Stacy Park was certainly a much larger park along the river, but this was very much a neighborhood that was removed where these were put. So, and as Carl has noted in the chat, there is a state plan for what's called the Capital State Park. There were to be two state urban parks, one in Trenton and one in Patterson. And at least a decade ago, maybe 2 decades ago, there was a design competition. There was a winner. There was a plan developed, and it's quite spectacular. And you see in this rendering along the river where some of that exists. It extends deeper along the State House, which would be to the left of even this area. but it's a beautiful plan. Now, we put in the chat a couple of more documents. One is links. And oh, wait, Ida's given me some information here. Ida's saying, I believe it was called
Kingsbury.
Kingsbury. Okay. Oh, well, maybe that's why the Kingsbury Towers are named
Yeah.
that. Thanks, Ida. Good catch.
Thanks, Ida.
Um, so, yeah, so that neighborhood was lost. It wasn't really Stacy Park. And even the reinstituted state park plan doesn't begin to touch the site where these buildings are. As you can see, these buildings are on a site. There would be another kind of a square, if you will, over that water tank that's part of the district energy system. So that would be kind of more landscaped, is what the plan calls for, but still more development between that park and the downtown. So that this affects the park plan at all is kind of a, just a distraction and not factual. So, but in that, oh yeah, Carl's adding more. He was saying it was called Jewtown. I've heard Sam Graff say that, and Sam Graff, who worked for a long time at the Trentonian and lives in West Trenton, grew up in that area. Now he has said that. Yeah, it was a quite vibrant working class neighborhood with many shops, the way it was described. So at any rate, in the chat, if you scroll all the way, there is a link to a document with lots of links, actually. It's got links to plans. It's got links to the state capital park plan, which is, oh, it's wonderful to look at. It's wonderful to think maybe that could happen, even though, boy, things don't move fast around here. And we've actually lost ground on that park plan with the State House renovation.
Is that the one with the links?
There's a link. There's a page with a lot of links, and one of them is the Capital State Park.
Okay, I thought that was the one with the two pictures.
No, well, that's okay. All right. Well, let me talk a little bit about attachments. There is another document in there that's just an overall summary that talks about the size of these buildings, the numbers of stories, but the state, in its infinite wisdom, before they tear anything down, they document it. So they hired Hunter Research, which is a cultural resources archaeological firm located downtown, was hired to document these buildings. And they document them by collecting plans, historical information about the buildings. They take a lot of pictures and they provide a report. And that report then is put in various library shelves to talk about what was there, all in advance of making sure it's not there anymore, all in advance of tearing the buildings down. But that is in the Trentoniana room. And so we took the digital version of that and uploaded it to the cloud. And there's a link that can allow you to see more than you might ever want to know about those buildings.
I'm going to share that
in the chat. Yeah, if you can share it, sure.
I'll share that document. I'll see if I can.
So
I'll see if I can put it in the chat.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how to do that. How did you?
Okay. Well, before we're done here, we'll make sure it's done. Okay. So Shakira, can you put up the slide about our tax burden?
Yes.
So economic development in the planning way is a kind of clean conversation, and everybody's for it. How could you be against it? But the urgency of that in Trenton, I think, cannot be overstated. I don't know if you can make that a little bit bigger, Shakira.
Let me see.
But this graph was done because people don't realize the burden that Trentonians, Trenton taxpayers, pay.
Is that any better?
Yeah, I guess. I hope people can see it. Again, this is on our website. But the burden that Trentonians pay for the honor, if you will, of hosting state government, because we have so much state-owned property, supplemented, of course, by county property, the federal courthouse, city property, nonprofits property, there is very little left to tax. So row houses occupied by, working people, modestly paid, modest means, are shouldering a burden way out of proportion to fairness, but also to other residents of the state, and for that matter, the county. And we have to make this case. We have to scream and holler. And, I don't think we do as good a job about that as we need to, and because the state's not paying attention. The state, makes the city beg for every last dollar as if we're a basket case or a charity case, when in fact it's our roads that are being torn up by the traffic generated by people coming in and out, and the litter that gets picked up, and all the resources. And then it's our residents that suffer because those resources get so massively cut back in these budgetary constraints. So what we took here was the top 20 cities by population in the state, because I think that's the most comparable universe of people to be looking at. And we've tracked this now for 3 years. You take the effective tax rates, and that's an adjustment so that you're kind of doing apples to apples. Tax rates vary from city to city, but the state issues effective tax rates. And our tax burden has just gotten worse as a comparison to everybody else. So when you look at that black line down the middle, that's the average effective tax rate for the state. And ours is 93% higher than the average. Now, everybody can't be average, I guess, but statistically, you'd want people clustering and not have an outlier as you see there. And there's nothing you can call that besides outlier. In statistical world and polling world, they throw out outliers because they can't be real. That can't be an indication of what is anybody's reality, except it's our reality. We are paying a huge tax burden. I say this all the time. We've all got friends in the Princeton area, and they are quick to complain about their taxes. And I'll say, yeah, you're paying double my tax, maybe even triple. But if your house is worth 10 times mine, I'm sorry, I'm not sympathetic. The burden is clear that I'm paying more from what I will ever get upon selling my house. So as far as building my kind of net worth or my personal wealth, I'm put at a severe disadvantage. And I'm also put at a severe disadvantage because it will be that much more difficult to sell my house. Mm-hmm. People will just move over the line into Ewing, our kind of balkanized multiple municipal madness, as the book was written, creates this problem. There's been efforts to regionalize these tax burdens for public facilities, and it just doesn't happen. There's not the public will to change what's always been happening. But I think this is an important case that has to be made to the state to say you cannot be cavalier about any opportunity. I mean, somebody might say, well, if those buildings go online as tax rateables, it's not going to add that much. But the truth is, we've got to fight for every morsel. We have got to fight for every piece we can get. And this is bigger than many because we are so out of whack.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just say, as an African American New Jersey resident, that I am particularly focused on the reality that for this particular administration, for the Murphy administration, Black New Jerseyans voted for this administration to the tune of 94%. 94% of us who are black who voted for this administration. And so I was hoping as a Trenton resident that this administration would take that into consideration, that this particular city is predominantly black and brown. And so, to that end, I would really appreciate some attention from this administration with regard to the redevelopment plans that have been in place for the past 30 years that we haven't been able to move on because when Christie came in, he removed the additional payment that our city was getting because of the large amount of state-owned property in this town. We were getting a payment in lieu of taxes because of all of the property that is consumed by the state. And so I'm particularly upset about this particular fact that we are paying such a high percentage of our effective tax rate is so much higher than everyone else's. I think it's just really unfair, and I think it's dismissive of the people who supported this administration. And I don't know who else to call out other than the governor's office. with regard to this reality. Who else do we talk to about this? We only have a portion of the legislators. I think our legislators are in favor of us being given better treatment with regard to state funds. But you know, their voices are few in the legislature. But we vote. We all vote, and I think that we should that we should speak up about that.
Yeah, there's another aspect to this, and I'm going to point to Carl and maybe ask if he could unmute himself. And Carl, if you could speak to the historic preservation angle here, I think there's nobody better, frankly, of the panel here. I wonder if he stepped away because that's just a picture of him.
I'm hope I'm asked. Let me see. Hold on.
George, I know he's got a couple comments here too. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can.
I'm muted now, right?
Okay. Yes, you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really an architect, but I mean, these buildings have been around for over 50 years, and they were built, I believe, well, they were built during the 60s. And if you could think of the World's Fair, that World of Tomorrow was the 39 Fair. But all those beautiful buildings that were being built for the fair, these buildings were built at that time, along with the Capitol complex, which was the library and museum and planetarium. However, these are really the only office buildings. Those other buildings are not office buildings of that style. They're, it's a library, it's a museum, but these are typical office buildings of that period. And they've been around, like I said, 50 years, and not many people can remember. I know I cannot remember Jewtown, even though as a kid I would go into town to shop with my parents, my mother. I don't remember what was there, but I sure do remember those buildings, and they were very gleaming white. It was to be the new Trenton coming up. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's what we thought of it back then, because it was, like you said, urban, not development, but what did you call it?
They called it renewal or removal.
Urban removal.
Urban removable, right. But at the time, this was thought of being Trenton's savior to the future. But the buildings are beautiful buildings. And I think if they were to be lit up at night, like somebody once suggested, with neon lights, or not neon, LED lights, they'd be quite spectacular on the skyline. Sure. And I think, it's like you said, it takes a lot of energy to construct a building. Why would you tear it down and build a new one, which takes even more energy to do and resources? Yeah. So it's better to keep what you have.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think about the reality that, we said nothing got built except that taxation building, but then that's not just true here. It's expensive and difficult to build in urban areas.
Yeah.
The numbers don't work. People don't get the rents or the purchase prices that they want. The taxes are high. That works against the numbers working on these deals. It's all, this kind of one catch-22 after another. And so the one kind of non-state, or should I say state adjacent type building that was built recently was the hotel. And I'm for the hotel. I would love to see that hotel come back online. But I think when you're talking about distinctive buildings, that makes no one's list.
Yeah.
And that is an example. That is an example of the hard financial reality of trying to put these deals together. So if in fact they tear these down and say build new there, it's very likely that you'll get some kind of mediocre, undistinguished buildings, because that's what the numbers will dictate. And we will have knocked down distinctive buildings, love them or not, that are kind of make you take a second look at them. And what is that to our streetscape? What is the point? If we want to be, a city that values its history, we need to value all of our history, be it colonial, be it industrial age, be it mid-century last century, and what's to come. And interestingly, when you look at it, these are within a cluster of modern buildings. Certainly the Justice Complex is a modern building, and certainly labor and industry and the new building are modern buildings. And, what they're kind of sketching out there is unknown. I can't quite even tell. Yeah. But I don't think you can make the case that these don't fit.
Yeah, I think it's useful to just kind of talk about these buildings specifically. We're calling them mid-century modernist buildings. They are kind of like in what they call the brutalist style of the buildings that we see in Washington, D.C. Well, these two buildings were put up were designed by a husband and wife team, Albert Klaus and Jane West Klaus, who each respectively worked with Mies van der Rohe and Le Corbusier. Now these are both, I mean, and you can look at the buildings and see which building was designed by who, because the round building definitely looks like Le Corbusier, and the square building looks like Mies van der Rohe when you look at their styles of architecture, and I think that it's worth holding on to. We are a city that is rich in history from the beginning of the country, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't hold on to the history that was generated by these, very well-known architects. By the history, by the tradition of these very well-known architects. I think it would be. I think it would be criminal to get rid of to get rid of these examples of this kind of structure, and I think it's worth, I just think it's worth noting when we reach the point where the city has turned a corner and people are beginning to come back to the city, and I look forward to that day. I know it's coming. I don't know when, but I do believe it's coming. I may not see it, but I believe it's coming. The idea is that these two buildings will be a part of the reason why people come. You go to particular towns because of the flavor that they offer, and this represents the flavor that is possible here in this town, as far as I'm concerned. So I think that's another reason why we want to see the building saved. I mean, you know, um, in addition to the questions of sustainability, I think that the history of the buildings is worth holding on to. So. So I don't know if people have questions or comments that you want to
Yeah. And I
offer.
saw the question that the links wasn't there. So I just loaded it again in the chat, and I think you can grab it. And I loaded these slides that we've been looking at.
Great.
So people can kind of download those too. Um, and I think we have a kind of a narrative description of, why we, kind of the case for saving these buildings. Do folks have other questions or thoughts?
I do.
So Christina said, "What's next? Next steps." So we are going to ask for a meeting with the EDA, and we're going to see whether they will consider offering these buildings up to the private market.
Yeah, we've been putting the case out there. The letter that we sent asking for the buildings made a lot of these points, and on our Facebook page and on our website, we have a link to a petition, and we would ask you all to sign that petition. It's got a kind of a pre-formulated letter, but there's also a spot for you to add your own specific comments and insights, depending on what's angle of it is of interest to you, and ask friends and family as well. As I said earlier, it's difficult during a pandemic. Nobody's out and about to just kind of be promoting this as much as we would like, but the more that we can get those signatures, if you live in New Jersey, when you sign, if you put your address in, it will also send it to your legislators in whichever district you live in. And we hope you'll spread this out to folks throughout the state, because remember, we're everybody's state capital. There's ownership statewide in the health and the appearance and the functioning of the city, the capital city. So we hope you'll consider doing that. I worry a little bit that a lot of people in Trenton are hesitant because their jobs or their families' jobs are tied in some way to state government. That's not helpful, but it's certainly real.
So Anne, this is Becky.
Hi,
Yeah, Becky. Hey, Becky. Becky's been a helpful part of the team here too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with everybody that back in the day, I think in the 80s, I worked in the health department building. I was the head of the communications function. I was looking at one of those photos that was the commissioner's office, and I, of course, was in there quite a bit. My office had that beautiful vertical window. I was able to look out at the river every day. It was absolutely lovely. I also worked over in the Justice Department on the top floor, had a great view over there. That area of the city is kind of like the forgotten area. But, you know, if we opened that up and we were able to get onto that river and, you know, followed through with some of those things, had those buildings there available for mixed use, it would just be awesome. And, you know, I would also say for the ag building, completely different. Obviously, it's a round building and it's got those horizontal windows, so it's a very different feel. But the opportunities to reuse those buildings, it's just a shame that we don't at least give the development community the opportunity to say if they might be interested in doing something there. I would love to see that whole area kind of refreshed. It would be awesome. The last thing we want is more parking lots.
Oh, exactly.
Agreed.
And the truth, the practical reality, I mean, yeah, floor to ceiling windows, boy, I'd love to live in a place that's got something like that, overlooking a river, no less, or even overlooking the street, the skyline of the city.
Yeah.
On all sides, the windows are spectacular. But
Yeah.
it's almost as if saying, you know, those views are for us, thank you very much, us state worker likes, not for you Trentonians, that, you know. But that said, okay, so the plan is there to build a lot of the reality, and what you see on that plan is relatively low-rise buildings. And the practical reality is it's so expensive to build high-rise steel in a place where you're not sure you're going to get, you know, Jersey City, Hoboken style rents. They go high because the rents are, they're going to get their rents. So it's interesting that if you were to tear these down and then, of course, build low-rise buildings, you're going to lose the views because they will be looking out over other low-rise buildings. So, you know, the extra 4 floors that these buildings offer that offer views will disappear to more generic kind of okay views. It's a striking missed opportunity for what people value.
Yeah, let's keep the personality that we've got here. We do have some jewels, and they're different. They're different. Let's celebrate them.
Yeah.
Well, for the round building too. The round building. Oh, what, Shakira?
No, go ahead with the round building, and then
I was going to say the round building. I had never been in those. I was really curious to see where those windows sat, because I thought, well, if they're above the bench of the labs and they're above eye level, that'll be a problem. But I was really pleased to see that if you're sitting at a desk, they're at eye level. So, you know, you do get the benefit of looking out those windows, and they're choppy because they're chopped into all small buildings. But if you were to open out all the walls and have big round floors, that's the open plan collaborative space that companies, creative companies, tech companies want. I mean, down in the Navy Yard, the Philadelphia Navy Yard, GlaxoSmithKline, the big pharma company, built a massive new headquarters with no offices. There are conference rooms, but everybody from the top down has no offices. You just kind of go find a table and work, or find a cluster of who you're working with on your team. But it's all that open plan. I'm not saying that gets 100% good reviews, but nevertheless, it's out there as a way some companies want to live.
Seems to be the new work plan for the tech companies anyway. I mean, most of the places like Google, Facebook, they have that open plan design so that everybody collaborates. But somebody asked about the New Jersey Historic Trust and whether or not historic preservation funding is available, and I imagine that the answer is yes. There is the possibility of that, right? I mean,
well, sure. A developer, that's another irony. A developer would be eligible for first the federal historic preservation tax credits because they're of an age. They have been already designated by the state's historic preservation office as being eligible to be on the National Register. That's out of DEP, unlike EDA. But the EDA, the owners of these buildings, the would-be demolishers of these buildings, has just put a whole bunch of money into historic preservation to match the federal tax credits because apparently they think historic preservation is important. What's wrong with this picture, folks? It's just, it's good for everybody else, but not you in Trenton. You just don't make the radar here. But yeah, there are new incentives for historic preservation.
Yeah. So two other people have questions, Carl and then Algernon.
Yeah, I have a question. And you talked in the beginning that you and the mayor had toured the buildings. I'm sure he personally is in favor of preserving the buildings. But where is city as a whole, city council? what is the city saying about these buildings to the state government? Are they quiet?
Well,
Because there's
well,
always that fear of repercussion, I guess.
well, that's exactly right. So Ben Delisle, the Housing and Economic Development Director, and the mayor, and one of the council people came through on that tour that we did. And Ben told me directly that when they have their what they call their executive order meetings with the state, Murphy set up an executive order to interact with the state city capital. They said that they've told them they want these buildings saved, but it was kind of just dismissed. That was, that's the quote, but that was what I took from the conversation. And the mayor was kind of unequivocal. He said his father worked in the round building. He has a real attachment to it, and he sees the value of them as a part of our streetscape. I think, this is me, I think any mayor of Trenton has a real difficult time fighting with the governor because he is so dependent on plugging that budget hole. We are on such a short lease, the city hall and are on such a short lease that they have to kind of choose their battles. And I think that's why the stakeholders group said, we just got to get out there on this question because the normal forces don't work. And somehow, there's battles on all fronts. I mean, we know the city is battling with the State Department of Transportation to get a good settlement on the historic Broad Street Bridge, a part of the daylighting of the Assapink. And it's been contentious. And the battles are everywhere. But I think that's why, we as kind of citizens need to rise up. I mean, Shakira and I have been talking that we think we need, I keep calling it another piece of civic infrastructure so that we can raise the flag on battles that perhaps takes the pressure off of the mayor's office as the council people, but makes the state still understand these issues have to be addressed and fairly.
Years ago, when the state wanted to cover up Petty's Run, me and Richard Willinger, we would protest once every month, I think it was, or every 2 weeks in front of the State House. I know the State House is closed, but the governor still has his office in Trenton. We had to get a permit from somebody in the government to have a table set up on the sidewalk to protest. And we would sit there with our banners and signs outside the lieutenant governor's office, protesting and talking to everybody that walked by. Is that something you could do where we could get a table? Wherever the governor's office is these days, is it in the state archives building?
It's in the state archives building, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, if somebody could kind of be the champion of that organization, I'll take a shift.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us would.
That's what we did. You have to see, I think it was the state police. Again, they were in the basement of the State House. You had to get a permit to do that. And we did. We had a folding table and 2 chairs. We put it on the sidewalk. We had signs. We had a petition. And we would just talk to people who walked by. They would ask us, what are you doing? And we would say what we're doing. So we were like a sore thumb in their eye. And eventually they decided not to cover up, and the county got the money to make it into some kind of a park.
Well, I think that, I kind of like that kind of stuff. And I think if you can spread the labor, it would work. But the reality, because I still, I'm downtown and I do work there, is there's nobody there these days.
Well,
the hard truth is you sit at a table
and there, and maybe, I don't know, at least they'll see you there. I guess with the governor's in his office.
You know what we could do? We could go to the COVID press conferences every day. Not go to them, but sit outside them, because that's what. Well, they're announced every morning.
Has a question.
Who's that?
Algernon has a question.
Algernon.
Yes. Hi. How you doing? Good morning, everyone. As a refugee from the Department of Health, I worked in those buildings for my entire career, 34 years. And in the lab in particular, the round building, as you call it, the birthday cake. It was designed as a laboratory. And the rooms inside serve a function as a laboratory. I'm not sure if you could make major alterations in the configurations of the rooms without structurally compromising that building, because it was purpose built for laboratories. But I would also say a laboratory can be put back there. There's nothing to say that you can't get the city of Trenton's water lab and other private interest laboratories in that building, because it's made for that in particular. The plumbing, the electricity, the lighting, all are conducive for laboratories. The problem with making them a office is that you can't open those windows at all. They just simply don't function as an opening window. And it can be kind of claustrophobic in there if you can't open the windows and kind of let the air flow through. But as a laboratory, that was kind of mandatory that it be a sealed situation. But the office building, the square building as we know it, perfect for condos. Like you said, the floor to ceiling windows, there's enough space on each floor where you could really make some nice apartments. Perhaps there's another use for the round building that would be conducive, but you really have to think about it pretty hard to make it livable as an office. And my last point is, we've talked about the boulevard on Route 29. I think that's been, everyone would like to see that, but they've not thought that through as well. That's a major, major artery going through from east to west. And you would have to wonder about what the effect would be if you started chopping that up and putting up lights. Traffic would simply go around Trenton. They would not even go down there if they were trying to travel from east to west. It would cause us to lose whatever influx or people coming down that road. They just simply go around it, and you would watch the area die on the vine. I always thought that wasn't a good idea. It needs to be redeveloped. We need access to the waterfront. It would be beautiful, but it has to be done intelligently. And I still haven't seen a plan that accomplishes both tasks. And I really don't know what it is they have planned for down there. And I have to say, I'm one who kind of pays close attention to these things, and I still have not seen a plan that, with me as a Trentonian, would be the best for that area.
Yeah. Well, I think that to a couple of your points, the first on the lab building, I mentioned again that in the chat, there's an exhibit that on the bottom of it, there's a link to the Hunter Research Files, and you can see all the plans. And you're right in the sense that that was purpose built for labs, because you can see that there are these kind of these chases, these flues throughout that run floor to ceiling, because they would have overhead, what do you call, lab hoods that then would exhaust.
Yeah, lab hoods and exhaust, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, but I think from a wall standpoint, it appears that the walls weren't structural, but each floor had these that I think could be adapted for many uses. But I think if you don't put it out to the development community and see what the market needs, you don't know. But the state, the EDA no less, built an incubator lab facility on Route 1 in North Brunswick many years ago because they wanted to stimulate pharma and biotech, and it's expensive for young companies to build or get lab space. Maybe this becomes another of those, if indeed that was successful and there is demand. But it's just never been offered to the development community to say this is out there. What can we make this into? So I think we renovate buildings. It's a time-honored tradition to reuse and reinvent buildings that we're looking to. As for the boulevard, I remember during the McGreevey administration attending workshops, and questions like yours came up, and I'm no traffic engineer, so I was just listening. But what they were emphasizing was not that it would necessarily lighten the number of cars. It would be a traffic calming effect, and it would allow more entries and exits, where right now there's such limited entries and exits that traffic that wants to get off sooner can't. So I
agree with you that. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, yes, I think the bottom line here is that let's see what the developers would bite which would have interest in that area. And certainly I agree with you 100%. Let's see, put it out there. And if someone's interested, certainly let them, move forward with it. But until we know that not the case, they should have the opportunity for development.
Absolutely. And who better than the Economic Development Administration to market this building? They can market the building across the nation. There isn't any reason why they can't solicit small new company, young companies that are out there. I mean, I was just reading an article in Forbes about the new billionaires. I mean, there are like, I don't know, 10, 20, I don't remember the number of new billionaires that were created during COVID because of people that are making new pharmaceuticals, and a lot of them are in China. I don't see any reason why there wouldn't be young companies, young startups around this country that would love to have legitimate lab space in a building where they have access. I mean, this is prime location in terms of industry. If you're looking for transportation, we've got rail transportation, highway transportation, up and down. I mean, we're in the middle of a $1 billion marketplace between Boston and DC, multi-billion-dollar marketplace, and companies would be interested. I think if we put it out there, to bring new business down there, that would be
I
great.
agree. I mean, I agree with you, Shakira. When you think about what's going on and the exodus from New York City and all these other places, I mean, we're an hour away on the train.
Yeah.
So, and why shouldn't we be trying to take advantage of that?
Right. Right. I mean, what company wouldn't want to be close to? I mean, we've got aerospace industry down the road here in Mount Laurel. We've got pharmaceutical companies. We've got rail transportation. We've got access to intellectual capital with Princeton and UPenn. I mean, we're in the middle of a really good market.
So, yeah. And, we also are right around the corner from an international airport. I
Yes.
remember working for a pharma company and flying from Mercer Airport to Europe and then to Australia.
Yeah.
So, hey, we got the world at our fingertips.
Exactly. I forgot about our airport.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Christina's got a comment she wants to make. You want to unmute yourself, Christina, and make your point?
oh, let me see.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that we should totally play the race card because that's what it is. Let's call it what it is. This town is predominantly black and brown, as you said, Shakira, and it's always getting the shaft.
Yep.
I believe because of that. Why not call them out on that? Let's expose this. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen?
The state doesn't want to deal with a race issue.
They don't want to deal with it.
Nobody does.
Right. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, but it's really true. I mean, the fact that we are just disregarded, and Carl, I heard you. I mean, I saw your comment about being a low turnout voting city, but votes are votes, and if we call it out, I mean, it is what it is. There are black and brown voters up and down the state who I think would have some empathy around this. So, I wouldn't
I
want
also,
that's for sure.
I just want to say that Frank and I will promote this on the Trenton Wave Show for as long as it takes. And our leading comment will be what you said, Ann. It's okay for everybody else, but not for you.
Yeah.
Not for you, Trenton. It's okay for you, Princeton. It's okay for you, Hoboken. It's okay for you, but it's not okay for you, Trenton. Why? Why is that?
Race.
I have no problem saying that.
Yeah.
So, anybody else?
I thought the same thing. I don't like to say the race card all the time, but I was thinking that when you were saying that would be a prime thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you're right, the city's mostly black and brown, and look how we're treated.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, I say, black voters in New Jersey voted for this administration to the tune of 94%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's something to promote as well. Like, hey, you voted for this guy and he's not doing what he said he was going to do.
And we'll put that in the
Maybe
promo.
it's time to get rid of him.
Yep, we'll put that in the promo.
We'll put that in a promo.
I see a question from Georgia that we kind of blew past. I'm getting an echo.
Yeah, what's going on with our echo here?
At any rate, Georgia.
I was just saying that one of the things that I put in the chat earlier was, that we haven't been. It was put in the way of a question as to, has this been put out to developers to see what their ideas might be? And Murphy wants to be seen as an urban-friendly governor, and he's coming up for re-election in the not too distant future. So, yeah, I'm all behind exactly what you're all saying with respect to not being afraid to make that an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we have to. We targeted the CEO of the NJEDA, Tim Sullivan, for our petitions and letters and our meeting requests because he's the point guy. He theoretically is the guy that's making the call, but we all know he's appointed. He serves at the will of the governor. He's the governor's appointee there, and we'd be happy to let the governor come in and be a hero here and save the day and make the right decision. We'd give him all the appropriate applause, but we haven't seen any evidence that he's paying any attention.
Do the right thing.
If anybody's got a particular entree to these folks, let us know.
So I take it that the state is not showing their hand here? So we have no idea what their agenda or their timeline is? Or how, you said they're moving fast. Are they moving too fast for us? How can we stop them if they're going down as a locomotive and we're just on a bicycle? How are we ever going to catch up with them and stop them?
Well, I will tell you that when we got to take that tour, and I was coordinating, I was told everybody's got to have a hard hat, everybody's got to have goggles, everybody's got to have a security vest. And I thought, boy, we're going to walk into a dust bowl. Well, they were still moving furniture out. That's just the rules. You got to have the hard hats, but there was no real stuff going on. But this is a good month ago, probably 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago. And we've seen some progress where there's now holes drilled in the lab windows. We do think that they probably had to do asbestos abatement first and take out old equipment. And frankly, that would be good. Do all that and then leave the buildings for developers. So that expense is now kind of taken off the table and not going to, burden a new development. I think that they'll say, well, we got this contract with Turner Construction. If we quit, we're going to have to pay them some money. I say pay them the money. Pay them a little bit of money, either to put it on hold and we'll bring it back if in fact nothing can be made to happen, or here's a flat fee, go away. This is too important to our capital city. Yeah. Because until those buildings go down, you can still stop it. We can still stop it. The governor can still stop it. And have we made a case? Have we made compelling arguments? I certainly believe we have. We need to get them out there.
Yeah, and so what we've done so far is we've reached out to Senator Turner, Shirley Turner. We got a letter into her, and we have a conversation into Assemblywoman Verlina Reynolds Jackson, and we haven't had a conversation with them yet. I think they will be more inclined to speak with us once we've had a conversation with Tim Sullivan, which now that's on the table. We do have an opportunity we're supposed to be setting up a meeting with him to discuss the possibilities. But, what we're asking for is for them to slow down. There's nothing to stop us from tearing the building down 3 years from now or 5 years from now if we don't have a developer who's willing to come in. But why do it now? Why do it, why do it this year? I don't see the rush.
Yeah, it's not like there's another, somebody waiting to build something on that site. They acknowledged, if you read the Jersey Digs article, that reporter was told that the plan is for parking. The plan is for parking. And if you look at the parking these days, that parking is not utilized that heavily. And I'm thinking that post-pandemic, there's going to be a lot more work from home and a lot less demand for parking downtown generally.
Right.
even if there's no particular reduction in the workforce.
Right.
That's just our reality. So there is no reason to rush to
I
create more
don't think that
parking.
I don't think we'll need more parking. We will need less as time goes on because I think people have kind of reoriented the way that they're doing work, and I think that's all well and good. I don't see any reason any problem with that, and so we don't need that parking, and we've got enough
Yeah,
now.
I
So
also think we need to get out there a concept that I happen to like and I want to talk up, which is that the state probably needs to rethink giving everybody at a certain grade level a parking space. Why not give them an allowance and they can maybe buy a parking space on their own, or maybe they can buy a transit pass for New Jersey Transit, or maybe they can decide to pocket that money, carpool, and go out to dinner in one of our restaurants after work. But this whole one way of doing accommodating the transportation needs of state workers is we got to turn our backs on that. That's old thinking. It
right,
doesn't do Trenton any good.
right. So are there any other questions? If not, we can kind of wrap this up. I just really want to thank everybody for coming to listen to our position, our thinking on this matter. I think it's uh, an important matter for the city of Trenton, and frankly, I think it's important for state of New Jersey residents. I mean, if I lived in uh, Burlington Township where I grew up, or Camden, or Cherry Hill, or Patterson, or Newark, or Sussex County, or Monmouth County, or anywhere, and I wanted people to come and spend some time with me, I would like to take them to my state capital. There isn't anybody I know who is interested in doing that at this point in time, anywhere around the state. We live in one of the most influential and powerful states in the union. Let's just face it, we do. You listen to all the late night talk show hosts, and lo and behold, they're all from New Jersey. We live in an influential place. Why shouldn't our state capital reflect that? Why shouldn't we look like we are representative of a strong economy, of an educated workforce? We actually do have a fairly educated workforce in this state. We have a strong economy in this state. I would like our state capital to look like that, regardless of where I live. I mean, I moved to Trenton 12 years ago. I'm here to stay as a resident, but I didn't grow up here. I'm not from here. But I want our state to look like it, to look like we, like I think we deserve as residents. So I'm just hoping that many more people kind of pay attention to it and think about why we don't look any better than we do, as a developing economy here in this town, in this state rather. So anyway, thank you so much, all of you, for coming and for listening, and sign the petition. I'll put the link again here. I think yeah, there's the link to the petition, and yeah.
And if you have any entree with reporters, news people that we can help to continue to get the story out, we're very much in need of that. We've got a great downtowner piece. We were thrilled and thankful to Dan Aubrey and Community News Service. We've got the Jersey Digs thing. We've been talking to a Philadelphia Inquirer reporter who, to quote, thinks this is a travesty. So we're hoping for an article from there. But the more this gets out, the more the pressure will be felt on West State Street.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing before we get off?
Sure.
First of all, I'm so glad I got on, and I was really so impressed with both of you and what you have to say. And I sometimes I'm reluctant because I grew up in Trenton. I love Trenton. I am in Trenton almost every day, work and church, from two different aspects. And I really do care about what happens there. But I sometimes am hesitant because I'm not a voter in New Jersey, okay, or in Trenton. But I really think this was a great session, and I thank you for doing it. And I guess my real question is there anything else we can do right now besides sign the petition?
I don't know. Is there anybody they can call?
Yeah. If you have any connections or contacts, we'll think about that. I see that you said if we do, Carl's suggestion of kind of camping out in front of the governor's office, your game. I think we're just going to keep improvising and trying to figure out how to work our way through this. And you say church and connections like that. If you could ask, invite folks that to sign that petition. And frankly, not everybody that signed that petition is in the state of New Jersey. There are people that kind of appreciate modernist architecture that don't want to see it torn down that have signed that petition. We've put it on different sites in that regard. I mean, there's no reason why we can't be.
Appreciate sustainable development. That's another reason to.
Yeah. Carl, is your hand up? Or is that from before?
I don't know. Carl, did you want to say something else? You're muted.
Oh, his hand is up.
Yeah.
No, his hand is down. Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you all for coming. And, if there's anything else you want to share, just share it on our Facebook page or on our Trenton's.
There's an email on. Yeah, and there's an email on some of those attachments. You can take a look at. Hopefully,
no,
everybody.
the meeting date hasn't been confirmed yet. I don't know. Okay. So are we good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you all. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the weekend.
You too.
And if it's a beautiful day, drive by the sites. They're very enchanting. I really like driving down there, walking down there, whatever.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Sure. Take care.
Bye.